right, so just for formality's sake, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Reverend Karen Bruno, and I'm ordained in the United Church of Christ.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So, can you give us a little bit about your background, please? You said you were ordained with the United Church of Christ. Maybe kind of give us a little bit about how you got into that.
Well, I'd have to credit Back Bay Mission with a whole lot of the reason I'm a minister. I started in high school going to Back Bay Mission, and my youth group also was a big influencer of that. I kind of took a few side roads after that, and eventually became ordained about 5 years after I completed seminary. Actually, so I think it was closer to 15 years after I completed seminary. I did spend about 25 years working in different kinds of social services before I settled into going to ministry.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you mentioned that your affiliation with the UCC kind of started with Back Bay Mission a little bit in high school. Can you reflect on that? How did you find out about Back Bay Mission?
Well, I moved to Hudson, Ohio in 1971. And during my freshman year, 1971-72, I started going to the church youth group. And the youth minister started talking about this place in Mississippi called Back Bay Mission and wanted to take the youth group there in the spring. And I think he'd already reserved the spot. So then he had to convince all the parents in this very affluent, upper middle class white community that it was a great idea to take a van full of teenagers to Mississippi. He successfully convinced them, and we went. And I ended up going for 8 March spring breaks in a row because I went all through high school and then all through college.
Wow,
And then I actually ended up working at Back Bay Mission for about 6 months after that.
that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, so you said you came 8 years in a row, which is unbelievable. Two questions here that came to my mind, if you don't mind me asking.
Uh-huh.
My first one is, what was your first impression that very first time you came to Mississippi and you came to Back Bay Mission?
Well, I was 14 and very sheltered in my upbringing. So coming to Back Bay Mission was very enlightening and educational and informative. I learned a lot about different kinds of people, different ways of life, about prejudice that I had really never seen or experienced. I remember going and sitting around and learning about the cycle of poverty and why people remain in poverty. I remember learning about how we couldn't fix up homes of people who rented because then the rent would just go up. We had to find people who owned a home to fix up because then they would have more pride in ownership and their homes would be fixed. I don't know. I just was a sponge and I was taking it all in.
Well, my second question that was kind of sprung up from that is kind of a follow-up of the one I just asked you. 8 years. So I'm guessing 14 to roughly 22. So in those 8 years, what within you do you think transformed? What do you think you went from being this naive, kind of sheltered girl at 14, and then at 22, you're a grown woman and you have 8 years of experience traveling and helping and working. How do you think that helped you transform and evolve and grow?
Well, it was a very significant part of my teenage and early 20s. I just learned so much about diversity, about oppression, about government and how it oppresses people, about healthcare and how it's not available. I mean, it was life-changing, the entire experience. Everything I learned has influenced my entire adult life as far as my social work and now my ministry. It's when I started going, I think by the second or third year, my dream was to work at Back Bay Mission. And on my 8th year there, I was asked by the director at the time if I was available for the summer to stay and work for Back Bay Mission. Well, God was speaking. And I said, of course. I said, I'm graduating in May. He said, oh, I don't want to hold you up from getting a job. If you don't want to come. I'm like, oh, no, I want to come. And I ended up staying actually for 6 months instead of 3 months. And I worked as the emergency assistance case manager. I think I had all of like $300 a month to give out to people. It was so small. And I think they were paying me $300 a month too. And of course, giving me some place to stay. I remember I went on food stamps, which is an amazing experience in and of itself. Going to the local social services office, standing out in the hot sun with about 50 other women, all African American, being the only white person in line. Just the whole experience of being in a different place with a different reality that my parents could never understand. I mean, they tried, but they never had those experiences that I had of getting to know people in the community who own their homes and how grateful they were for all the work we did. I mean, everything in my life was influenced by those 8 years.
And I think you made a great point. Hearing about something you can kind of empathize, but living it and experiencing it, it's a whole different level once you live it and experience it. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty awesome. So that kind of leads me to my next question then. You seem like you have a deep, deep passion for Back Bay Mission, and it really was a big integral part of your life. So let's say that I have no idea about Back Bay Mission. I've never heard of it before. How would you describe to me Back Bay Mission and the work that's done there?
Well, for me, Back Bay Mission has two jobs. One is the actual help it offers to the community. But for me, the bigger job was educating someone who would have had no idea of another way of life in our country that I would have never seen where I lived and where I grew up. So I think the dual jobs of actually helping in that direct community, but bringing people in from all over the country to educate them and to give them a direct experience of diversity in economics and in race is vital and important.
Awesome. And I just had another question pop up, if you don't mind. I'm kind of curious. You had 8 years working with Back Bay as a volunteer, plus you had a little experience working here as a staff member. Could you describe your coworkers, your colleagues, the staff that were there at Back Bay Mission at the time? Because I think, in my experience at least, Back Bay Mission is very much evolved with the times and kind of, serve those in the most need. So in the early 20s, it was the fisher folk. And then as it evolved, civil rights became a bigger and bigger part of Back Bay Mission and its work. And as we see nowadays, we're dealing with the pandemic and everything. So I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, how would you describe your colleagues and your coworkers and the people that ran Back Bay Mission at the time?
Good question. They were very passionate about the work. They kind of divided it up into the overall organizing and fundraising, and then the passion for getting a more sustainable health clinic going was kind of a side thing that was happening. But and then somebody that was in charge just of the work camps, just of making sure there was connections to the community and opportunities, scheduling it, educating people who came in. Everyone was incredibly passionate and so loving, and taught me a lot about just letting people be who they are. Not to come in with judgment, right? Not to come in and see these people somehow through your lens, but see that them through their own lens, of their life experience. And that was powerful as well.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we still have a saying to this day: we meet people where they are. You accept them for what they are. You love them for what they are, right? So I think that's really awesome that even 30, 40, 50 years later, that philosophy still exists at Back Bay Mission. So that's really cool to be able to hear that. Yeah. And that was just an ad-lib question. So that's really awesome that you answered it that way.